let's take another glance at the slide and the file structure here. And as usual, I'll first create the necessary directories for this role. In this case, that will be Docker with subdirectories tasks, files, and handlers. And let's open main.yml in tasks subdirectory. Using pacman module, I will install Docker package. Then using built-in file module, I will create a new directory etc docker, to which I will then copy a new custom file named daemon.json. Daemon.json can configure how Docker daemon will work. Docker daemon will read this file on startup and configure itself with any instructions it finds in it. I'll then start and enable Docker service using the built-in systemd module. I will also install python-docker package, which we'll need later for monitoring Docker containers using checkmk. And finally, I will install Docker Compose, also using pacman. If you want to install Docker Compose not as an Arch Linux package, but from the latest release from the GitHub, you can use this included task. I'll leave it commented out as I will use the Arch Linux package, but let's see how this would work. Save the file and open dockercompose.yml also in tasks subdirectory. There are a few new things here, so make sure to check Ansible's documentation page for all the details, but it goes something like this. You use built-in shell module to get the version number of currently installed Docker Compose, if there is one, and you save that to a variable. You do the same thing for the latest release over at GitHub, and you install that latest release if those two variables are different. This is probably not a bulletproof way to tackle this kind of problem, but it worked for me in the past. Considering that Arch Linux has Docker Compose package available through pacman, I'll use that one, but I think it's useful to know this approach too. Save the file and open daemon.json in files subdirectory. In here, I will define address pools from which Docker containers will get its IP addresses. The reason I had to add this is because, for reasons yet unknown to me, some of my containers would spin up on a completely different subnet. First few containers would use the default subnet, which at this moment is 172.17.0.0/16, but then some of the containers would get 192.168. something, and I must admit that I don't know the reason. This was a problem because it was messing with my firewall and whitelist rules, and adding these lines in daemon.json fixed that. Although having 5 subnets with /16 is almost surely an overkill, the issue I had might something to do with the number of Docker networks, and since nothing is broken, I left it this way. There is probably a better way to fix this, and I'd like to hear it, but this works and I'm fine with it. Save the file and open main.yml in handlers subdirectory. And this is plain old systemd restart for the service in question. Save the file, open setup.yml, add docker to the roles list, comment out all previous roles, save the file, and run Ansible playbook. Ansible has finished, so let's go to the VPS and check it out. Running docker ps would display running containers, but since we have none, this is empty. Running docker images is the same. We don't have any images on our system yet. Let's run a special image named hello world. Note that when you omit the tag, latest is implied. This hello world image conveniently explains what happened here. First, Docker client contacted the Docker daemon. Docker daemon pulled the hello world image because it was not already present on our system. Docker daemon then created a new container from that image, which ran the executable that produced this output. Docker daemon then streamed the output back to the Docker client, which sent it to our terminal. If I now run docker images, I will see that this hello world image is present. If I run docker ps, however, it is empty again. Why is that? That's because that container is no longer running. It displayed this information and exited. Its image was not created in such a way for it to be a long-lasting process. It does what it does and then exits. I have to do docker ps-a, which displays stopped containers too, and here it is. If I now do docker rm and then either container ID or its name and check the docker ps-a again, I can see that it's gone completely now. Remember when I said that you can use Docker client to talk to the Docker daemon on another server? Well, I have Docker client installed here on my laptop and I can do this. So using ssh connection do-p.com configured in the ssh config file, I can list images over on the server. I can also do RMI, which will remove the image and specify its name. And if I now go back to the VPS and list images again, I can see that it is really gone.